Welcome to Excel and Business Math video number 20. Hey, in this video, we got to talk about the famous, the universal percent formula. And guess what? There's not just one. There's one, two, three different famous formulas. And with these three formulas, we can solve all sorts of common business problems. These formulas are used millions of times every single day on the planet Earth, not just in business, but many other fields. Not only that, but if we learn these formulas well, it'll help us consume business news. Because really, these formulas are the relationship between three different things: part, base, and rate. And if we understand the three different formulas, we can solve for any one of the elements if we're given the other two. This is particularly useful because when we're reading a report, listening to a nightly news report, we are in a meeting, oftentimes we're given two of the elements and we need to find the other element. Part, base, rate, three different formulas. We're going to see 8 fun business examples, and there are 10 awesome homework problems for you to use and practice at the end of this workbook. Now let's start our study of these three formulas by going over to the sheet percent formula. And we're going to start off with just one of the three formulas. And this formula is rate times base equals part. Now we start with this formula because all of us have probably seen this at some time in our life. Rate, tax rate, times some amount purchased at the store equals the tax we paid. Now when we see rate times base equals part, oftentimes you have a written statement that you have to interpret. The rate is usually a percent. Multiplication is usually represented by of. Base, well, that's usually something like the price you paid or the total points possible on a quiz or a test. The equal sign oftentimes is communicated with is, but could be are or were also. And then the part is usually some resultant something, some part of the base. Now, before we look at our first three examples and then a bunch of other examples, it's always helpful to define our variables or our terms. Rate, oftentimes communicated as a percent, but as we've seen in this class so far, it could be a decimal, a fraction, a rate, or a ratio. The rate is also going to represent how many parts for every 100. The tax rate represents how many pennies out of 100. 75% score on a test represents 75 points out of every 100. The rate could also be what you need to multiply base by to get the part. Now, that concept is more important next week when we talk about increase-decrease problems. But notice that definition is straight from the formula over here. The rate is what you need to multiply by the base to get the part. Now, the base, that's the whole or the total. Or it could be the starting point or the begin point. It also can be that to which something is being compared. That will become more obvious what that means when we actually look at the formula for rate. Now the part, that's always going to be part of the base. Or when we talk about increase-decrease problems, it will be the ending point or the end. Now the rate can be smaller than, equal to, or bigger than 100%. That means we get the full range. It could be 5%, 100, or 110%. Similarly, the part can be smaller than, equal to, or bigger than the base. All right, so we're going to start off with three examples, and we are solving for the part. That means we're given the rate and the base. Oh, here's the tax rate, 5%. Here's the price of the item, 10 bucks. Rate and base, we can easily solve for the part, taxes paid, equal sign, and I'm going to get the rate times the base. 5% tax rate times price, Control Enter. That gives us 50 cents tax paid. Now for this example, notice that the rate less than 100%. and the part we calculated, that part is less than the actual base. Part less than base. Our second example, we are given your percentage score on the quiz. You love that. You got 100%. Possible points on the quiz, that's the max possible, 30. So we can easily figure out your score. Equals, we'll take the rate times the base, Control Enter. 30 points. Now in this example, the percentage or the rate is exactly equal to 100%, and the part that we calculate is exactly equal to the base. Our third example, we know last year's sales were 100,000, and someone communicates to us that this year's sales are 110% of last year's sales. That means we can multiply this rate or percentage times last year's sales, and it will give us this year's sales. Equals, and I'm going to get the rate times the base. Control Enter. This year's sales, $110,000. Now let's take a closer look at this example and scroll down. Sometimes people communicate the value of this year's company sales by saying, this year's sales are 110% of last year's sales. It means that for every $1 last year, the company made $1.10 this year. But guess what? We can literally take this written or communicated statement and break it apart. This year's sales, well, guess what? That's the description of the part. R, that's a description of the equal sign. 110%, that's the percentage we use for rate. 110% of what? Well, the of is multiplying, and of what? Last year's sales. So there it is, the part, this year's sales. R, that's the equal sign. 110%, that's the rate. Of, multiplying, and last year's sales, that's the base. All right, so rate times base equals part. That's only one of three formulas. Let's go over to the sheet. Percentage formula, really three formulas. Now here's the three formulas. Part equals rate times base. So when we're solving for part, we use these two. But look at this, rate and base. We can actually take part divided by base to get rate. This one probably makes sense to you too, because think of tax rate. 5 pennies compared to 100 pennies, that would give us 0.05 or 5% as a rate. If we know part and rate, we can solve for the base. Now there's a great memorization trick. If you draw a circle like this, put part in the top, base and rate into the bottom, anytime you don't remember what the formula is, you can just take your hand, and if you want to solve for part, you hold your hand over the diagram, hiding it, and then this says, oh, they're next to each other, base times rate. Then, if you're trying to solve for rate because you have part and base, cover your hand up. And look at that, part divided by base, just like that formula right there. If you want to solve for the base, use your hand, cover up base, and it shows you part divided by rate, just like this formula right here. Now, actually, here's the hand. This sheet right here is page 3 in your PDFs. If you ever want to hold it and like manually hold your hand over whichever part, you can do that. Now, these three formulas actually can be easily derived. Here's our original formula. Part equals base times rate. If I divide both sides of the equation by b, notice just like we were canceling prime factors, well, there's a b in the numerator and denominator, so we cancel both of them and we're left with r. And then because we had to do b on both sides, look at that. On the other side, we're left with part divided by base. So rate equals part divided by base, just like is written right here. Similarly, if we take this formula, whoop, bring it down here, and divide both sides by r, well, look at that. On this side, we have an r in the numerator and denominator. They cancel. We had an r over here, so we had to put an r over here also. b equals p divided by r. The base equals the part divided by the rate. Now, this particular formula, solving for base, over here solving for base, this one will come in real handy next week when we start to study increase and decrease formulas. But there you go. That's why they're true. Here's the three formulas listed, and use the hand if you want when trying to figure out. Now, even if we didn't see that these were true, we could sort of prove to ourselves with a simple example. Tax rate, 5% or 0.05. Price of the item, 10 bucks, and the tax paid 50 cents. If we know these are all true, we could just test each formula. So part is equal to rate times base. I better get 50 cents, and sure enough, I do. Now, I can solve for the rate. Rate, I'm taking part divided by the base, and I better get 0.05 or 5%. And then the base, I better get 10 bucks when I take the part, that's the 50 cents, tax paid, divided by the tax rate. When I hit enter, I get exactly 10 bucks. So with a simple example, you can prove that 1, 2, 3, all three formulas work. Also, I should have had this empty right here. We don't have to like put the equal sign and the multiplication and spread it out like that. We can just solve for the part equals rate times base and enter. Rate equals, there's the part divided by the base. When I hit enter, I better get 0.05 or 5%. The base I'm solving for, the base given that I know part divided by the rate. And when I hit enter, there's the 10 bucks. All right, so that's a simple example where we're just trying to familiarize ourselves with the formulas. Now let's go look at 8 awesome examples. I'm going to go to the sheet Examples, Percent Formula 1 to 4. Now for the examples in this video and the homework, we do not need to follow the word problem 5 steps. We will have to do that next video, and you will have to do it on the test if it specifies. But of course, we must always follow Excel's golden rule. Don't ever hand in a formula that goes like this. That violates Excel's golden rule. It's the leading cause of error in spreadsheets for the past 3 decades, so don't do it. No problem. Here's example 1. If the price of the phone was $400 and you were given a 25% discount, how much was the discount? Now, every single time, here's what you do. You might be able to do this one in your head, but immediately you go, OK, 3 parts. I'm going to type rate, base, and part. I'm also going to type every single time, what formula should I use? Now, every time, and we'll actually copy and paste this every time we solve a problem here. But now we just have to figure out which one of the 2 numbers we're given. If the price of the phone was $400 and we're given a discount, well, that one's an easy one. I know the rate, 25%. Now watch this. We learned a few different ways to enter percentages. I'm going to type 25 and a percentage symbol. When I use percentage symbol as I'm typing, I'm telling Excel to format this as a percent. You could see that it's grayed out. Up in number dropdown, it says general. But when I control enter, now it says percentage with 0 decimals because I didn't type any decimals in. Also, always put the noun. What is this 25%? What is the rate? What's the name for it? Percentage discount on phone. All right, and the price of the phone, that sounds like the base. So I'm going to type price of phone tab. And guess what? Just as we number formatted as we type. Look at that cell, general. If I type $400, control enter, I have number formatted as I type, and now it says currency up there. Now we have those 2, so of course the part is what we're trying to solve for. Now I'm going to type dollar discount just to distinguish it from the percentage discount and tab. Now before I do it, every time I'm going to write the formula out. Part equals base time rate, so here we go. Right click, find some color, and a border. Equal sign, up to get base, times up arrow to get the rate, and enter. So we have our answer. The discount, $100. Now, every single time I do one of these calculations, I am going to check. Because guess what? Now I have this part. and I can use this part with one of the other ones to solve the remaining. So I'm going to check. If I just solve for part, I can either choose to solve for rate or base. I'm going to start with rate. So the formula for rate is part divided by base. Tab. Equal sign, and I'm going to up arrow to get the part. That's the $100. That's the discount divided by the phone's total price. When I compare this part to the whole, I better get Control Enter 0.25 or 25%. Check. Now let's go on to example 2, and guess what? I'm going to cheat. I love Excel. I can copy. These are the labels I'm going to use every time. Control C and Control V. I can turn off the dancing ants with escape. All right, example 2. If your points earned on a test were 90 and your percent score was 75, it already sounds like we have a rate. And if those are my points on a test, that sounds like a part. So if the percentage score was 75, what were the total possible points available on the test? So they're asking us to solve for the total, which is the base. All right, so our rate, we know it's 75%. And I definitely need to put a label for this, something like your percent score on test. The base, that is what we're solving for. Total points on test, and enter. The part, that's the 90, so I'm going to put that 90 right here. And then the label is your points on the test. So right here, we're going to make our formula, but our formula, we're going to type it out each time so we reinforce this. I'm solving for base, and base is part divided by rate. All right, so I come up here, equals, there's the part, 90 points, divided by the rate, 75. When I hit Enter, there's the total points. So 120 points were possible on the test. Now, we have our base. We can either choose the formula for rate or for part. To check for our base, I'm going to choose part. Part equals rate times base. Whoops, I got an 8 there. I'm going to cheat. Right-click Mini Toolbar. There's my painter, and boom. Equals. There's the rate times the total points. So 75% times 120 better equal 90. And it does. We get a check. All right, now let's copy our labels, Control-C and Control-V for problem number 3. If you had $2,000 in the bank for the month, and you earned 10% in interest, what was the monthly interest rate that you earned? Now, later at the end, the last 2 weeks of this class, we'll talk about finance. For this example, we had $2,000 in for the whole month, and they're going to pay us a flat monthly interest rate, and they paid us $10. So it sounds like we do not have the rate. They're asking us for this rate. The base would be the amount you had in the bank, and the part would be the amount of interest they paid us in dollars. So the base, amount in bank for a month, that's as you type, I'm going to type a $2,000. Now you notice we're typing and number formatting at the same time. This is a single number, so sometimes it's faster to do that than it is to enter the number and go up and apply some number formatting. Of course, if we had lots of numbers, we would pre-number format or type in the numbers and number format them later. Part we definitely know. Amount of interest paid or earned, tab, $10 and enter. So it looks like we're trying to solve for rate. We definitely want to put monthly, not just interest rate, because there's all sorts of different interest rates, yearly, monthly, quarterly, daily. Tab. Our formula, we're solving for rate, part divided by base. Now we can come up here. Equals, we get our $10, that's the part they paid us, divided by the total base. Control Enter. 0.005. Now we can format this. I'm going to leave it as a decimal, but right here I'm going to say equals. Click on that. We can come up and apply 2 decimal percentage, and we see that that is 0.5%. If we wanted to express that as a fractional percent, we could click on that right there. Control-1, we could come down to custom, And as we talked about before, question mark slash, and I'm going to hard code the 10 in because I want it expressed as a tenth. As soon as I type a percentage symbol, it slides the decimal 2 to the right, and we get 0.5%. Now we solve for rate, so we can choose either the formula for base or part. I'm going to choose the formula for part. Part equals rate times base, equal sign. There's our rate times, there's our base. Control Enter, I better get 10. Check, I do. Example number 4. Let's copy and paste, Control C, Control V. Escape to turn off those dancing ants. Example 4. If the Super Bowl stadium had 70,000 fans and 1/3 of the fans left after the third quarter, how many fans left the stadium after the third quarter? Well, it looks like that's the total, 70,000 fans, and 1/3 of the fans. Remember, rates can be given as percentages, fractions, decimals, ratios, or rates. That's definitely 1/3 times the base, so that'll be our rate. I'm going to type fraction of fans who left the stadium, tab, equals 1 divided by 3, because I know that is a repeating decimal. I definitely want to apply fraction number formatting, Control 1, come down to fraction. And this one's easy. I can just use the built-in. Actually, we could have gone to the drop-down up there. The base, I was given that. Number of fans at start of Super Bowl, tab. Watch this, 70,000. That comma will not go into the cell. Control Enter, you can look up in the formula bar. That's the type of number formatting as we type, just as we did with currency and percentage above. The part we're solving for, how many fans left after the third quarter? Our formula, we're solving for part. Part equals base times rate. So right here, equal sign. There's the base times 1/3, that's the rate, and enter. Whoa, look at that. It pulled the number formatting from there. No problem. I can apply general. Now, we're not going to use this in any other subsequent formula. We could round if we want. We'd have to round to the ones position. But I'm just going to decrease the decimals. Or really, I should Control 1, go to the number tab, and under the number group, be sure and check the separator. That just makes it easier to read. 0 decimals, click OK. So 23,333 left. Now we can check. We have the part. We want to use the part and check it with one of the others to find the other. I'm going to choose to solve for rate. Part divided by base, tab. Equal sign. There's the part divided by the total. Better give me 0.33333. Check. All right, now let's go and look at examples 5 to 8. I'm going to click on the sheet examples 5 to 8. Example 5, a news report said that 2,000 people lost their homes in the mudslide, and that represented 1 in 5 of the total people in the city. Given that information, what is the total number of people who live in the city? Well, when we read through this, they're talking about total people, asking us for total number of people. So it seems like we're going to be solving for the base. This is not all the people who live in the city, so that's the part. And instead of a decimal, they gave it to us 1 in 5. That is a fraction, 1/5. So for the rate, I'm going to come over, equals 1 divided by 5, Control Enter. I'm going to use the built-in fraction number formatting right here to display it as 1/5. I'm going to type fraction of people who lost homes. The base, that's the total number of people who live in the city. Tab, and that is what we're going to be solving for. The part, that's the 2,000 people. People who lost homes, or something like that. And then 2, 000 will format as we type. Now the formula to use, we're solving for base, so that's base equals part divided by the rate, and enter. So let's do our formula. Equals, there's the part divided by up arrow, there's the rate. When I hit enter, 10,000 people. That's the total number in the city. Now we can check. We have the base, so I can either choose rate or part. I'm going to choose part. Part equals rate times base equals rate of 1/5 times the total people. Better give us 2,000. And yes, it does. Check. All right, example number 6. Your total points earned for the class were 455. The syllabus says there are 510 total points possible. What is your decimal grade rounded to the thousandth? What is your percentage grade rounded to the 10th of a percent? All right, so it sounds like we're solving for rate, and we are rounding it 2 different ways. Decimal grade, that's the rate that we're trying to solve for. Decimal grade, but this one we need to round to the thousandth. This one is percent grade, 10th of a percent, and I don't quite have enough room, so I'm going to put a percent symbol. Now, the base that we're given, that's the total points for the class. That will equal 510, enter. The part, your points for the class, that equals 455. Formula, we're solving for the rate. So rate is part divided by the base. Up here, we'll do our first formula equals, where's the part? 455 divided by the base, total points possible. So the decimal unrounded is that right there. Now, we're going to keep it as a decimal, but we're going to use equals round, up arrow, and we're counting on our fingers. Tenths, hundredths, thousandths. So that's 3, close parentheses, and enter. Now, I'm going to make sure this is pre-formatted. I'm going to come up and add percent with 2 decimals showing. You ready? Equals, and I'm going to up arrow, control, enter. All right, so the 10th of the percent is right there. But guess what? We're looking at the underlying number there and there. 1, 2, 3. That 2 right there, even though it's the 10th for a percent, underneath we need to use the same exact formula. Round, and we're rounding, comma 3. Because remember, formulas don't see number formatting. They look at the underlying number. Now we solve for a rate, so we can either choose to check it with the base or the part. I'm going to check it with the part. Part is equal to rate times base equals. There's the rate. The unrounded one is the one I need to use to check, times. And there's the base, enter. 455, that's the part. That's what we were checking for. So we got to check. All right, example number 7. A Highline college where I teach, administrator said that this year's enrollment was 125% of last year's enrollment. If last year's enrollment was 3,456 students, what was this year's enrollment? Well, we're definitely given a rate more than 100%. We're definitely given last year, so that's the starting point or our base, and we're trying to solve for the part. So rate, this year's enrollment as a percentage of last year's enrollment. I'm going to add some word wrap there. That was given to us as 125%. I'm going to format as I type. Base is last year's enrollment. That's where we're starting. 3,000, and I'm going to format as I type, comma, 456, and enter. The part we're trying to solve for. This year's enrollment tab. The formula we want, part equals rate times base, tab. All right, so you ready? Equals, there's the starting point, times a rate more than 100%. That means we'll end up at a bigger number than our starting point. So that means we increased to 4,320. We have a part, so we can pick one of these other ones to check. I'm going to choose to check. How about base? Part divided by rate equals, there's the part divided by the rate. And when I hit enter, I better get exactly the base. Check. All right, our last example, example 8. If the monthly interest rate for a CD bank account was 0.4%, compounded monthly, we'll see what that means at the end of the class in our finance section, and you earned $5.60 in interest paid for the month, how much did you have in the bank Same amount whole month. Well, we're trying to find out how much we had in the bank, which was the starting point. There's the interest, and there's the rate. So we can use the formula to calculate the base. The rate, monthly interest rate. Now, we have to enter 0.4%. No problem. If you know how to type 0.004, the trick we learned is we always know that second zero is always the penny position or the 1% position. So anything after, that would be the tenths. If you can't remember that, just look up here. 4/10 equals 4 divided by 10. Well, we have to slide the decimal 2 to the left. We do that by dividing by 100. Control-Enter. Now I want to add a formatting. Control-1. Number down to custom. Question mark slash, and I want tenths, so I type 10 in the denominator, question mark, and there's the 4/10. Click OK. You could also, as you see here, I entered that number and simply use the drop down up here. Now we know the part, interest paid for the month, $5.60, and enter. Formula to use, basis part divided by rate. The label for the base, amount in bank for the month. Equals, we take our part divided by our rate, and that gives us 1,400. We have solved for base, but now I want to use that number with one of the other ones to check. Part equals rate times base equals, there's our rate times, and there's the base we just calculated. When I hit enter, it better exactly equal 560. All right, that was a lot of fun with 8 examples of the famous percentage formula, really all 3 of the formulas. There are 10 homework problems. Be sure to practice them all because we'll use the concepts in this video throughout the rest of the class. Over on the sheet 1 to 4, we saw problems 1 to 4. On the sheet PF, really 3 formulas. We talked about the 3 formulas. We talked about why the formulas are true and some memorization tricks for remembering the actual formulas. On the sheet percent formulas, we talked about the basic formula and defined our terms. And remember, if you like that video, be sure to click that thumbs up, leave a comment, and sub, because there's always lots more videos to come from Excel is Fun, including next video, video number 21. We'll use these formulas on a couple of word problems. All right, we'll see you next video.